Ahead of the NFL trade deadline, the Denver Broncos have made a move, investing in going younger with their defensive side of the ball. But could more capital be on the way here for the Broncos? We'll break that down and much more here on today's breaking news episode, Lockdown Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Lockdown Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com. The NFL trade deadline obviously is approaching on Tuesday at 2 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time, and the Broncos have already made a move. They're the first team to make a move before the deadline on Tuesday. We'll break all that action down here on today's episode of the show. We'll wrap things up on this bonus breaking news episode by talking about, will this be the only move the Broncos make at the deadline? But we'll kick things off by the trade itself. The Broncos sending away Baron Browning, their 2021 third-round pass rusher, to the Arizona Cardinals in exchange for a sixth-round pick. Sayre, your thoughts on this? Obviously, this was one of the moves that we anticipated being made. It's the first move of the week that the Broncos or that any NFL team has made ahead of the trade deadline. Denver going a different direction at pass rusher. The writing was kind of on the wall with this one.
Yeah, Cody, a really fun bonus episode of Locked On Broncos here for us, because obviously, although it's, bittersweet to say goodbye to Baron Browning, we know that he's going to have the opportunity to go to Arizona, where he's going to play for Jonathon Gannon, who's historically gotten a lot out of his pass rushers. But not only do we know that he's going to get an opportunity to go there and showcase his stuff, as we're sitting here recording this, Adam Schefter reports the Denver Broncos have got a 4-year extension for Jonathon Cooper off the edge. So one Ohio State pass rusher out, and the other one getting locked in on a 4-year deal over the weekend. Somehow that news was kept quiet from everybody, Cody, but this is how things go here at Locked On Broncos. Cody and I just recorded an episode a little while ago. Baron Browning trade comes through for tomorrow, right? So the Baron Browning trade comes through. The Jonathon Cooper extension news comes through. And here we are. Sean Payton was just chatting with everybody a couple of hours ago. So my mind is kind of in a tizzy right now, Cody. I'm a little bit flustered by this, not going to lie. But I think let's start with the Baron Browning stuff. Obviously, the Broncos getting a 6th-round draft pick in exchange for Baron Browning seems like pretty fair value, considering there's only 9 weeks left in the season and the Broncos only have 8 games left to play.
Yeah, and look, obviously it's clear cut that the reason that this move happened, the vision, and as we were going to highlight literally in our show notes before the extension news ever came out of Jonathon Cooper, was Denver's been very pleased with the direction in which they've seen Jonathon Cooper grow and the emergence of Nik Bonitto, who they believe internally is a potential superstar pass rusher. And look, he's had, previously before the Baltimore game, had a sack in 6 straight games. Maybe that'll get changed from the Ravens game as well. Maybe it'll turn into 7th. We'll see. But obviously, Denver's loved the production they've gotten out of Cooper. They've loved the production they've gotten out of Bonitto. And they've been very pleased with the progress that Jonah Ellis, their 3rd-round rookie in this year's NFL draft, has made. And Jonah's obviously played a tremendous role in a role player type of position. Browning started the year here for Denver as the starter. An injury in week 2 kind of put him on the shelf. Then Nik Bonitto's explosion a little bit made it to where, hey, you can't go back to Baron Browning as a starter opposite of Cooper in this situation, because those 2 guys are the leading sack producers for this Denver defense that has been really good this season, minus the Baltimore game on Sunday. But then they're even pleased behind the scenes as well with undrafted rookie free agent Dondre Tillman, who's been impressive. Obviously was a star pass rusher in the UFL just a season ago. But Sayre, that's not even the icing on the cake here. When you talk about the edge rusher position here for Denver, they have Andrew Farmer on the practice squad. Not going to look too much into that, but Drew Sanders is poised to stay at the outside linebacker position. From what I have observed, obviously he's been on the side field for the last month or so, progressing through his rehab because he tore his Achilles in the month of April, right before the NFL draft. They're really pleased with maybe what they can have in that group. So I think that the vision for this is obviously younger for this team at the position. But I also want to ask you the question here now, Sayre, like, what all factored into this move? And more importantly, like, for the Broncos, what do you think the vision is for pass rusher with all of these players that are there at this position currently?
Well, I think the biggest factor to this move is that time's just running out, right? I mean, Baron Browning is a free agent in 2025. The Broncos probably held out some hope that he could become a second contract player for him. And you obviously saw him land on temporary IR earlier this year. He started last season on IR. So it's really been a tough go for him in terms of staying healthy. Whereas somebody like Jonathon Cooper has outkicked the coverage, so to speak, right? A 7th-round pick from that same draft class, a teammate of Baron Browning's at Ohio State. Cooper has really been ascending, year over year for the Denver Broncos. In fact, I think one of their best defensive front players, just in terms of the energy that he brings, the consistency that he brings, a really good player and being rewarded for that. So time was just running out for Browning. And I don't think the Broncos, honestly, Cody, could have done better than a 6th-round pick in terms of compensatory draft, especially with as involved as they're planning on probably being in free agency next year. It's not realistic to say, hey, they could have got this as a compensatory pick. I mean, that's not going to be the case, more than likely. I mean,
Yeah.
pick for Baron Browning for 8 games is really good value for the Denver Broncos, considering all the other guys that you mentioned they like, that are playing, that have played better. Dondre Tillman, frankly, has played better this season on defense and special teams. So it's going to be nice to get him back into the lineup. It's great for Browning to get him to an opportunity. And that's a big thing here, is like, you're doing right by the player. He's going to be playing as much over the course of this season. So you do right by him to get him to a spot where I believe the Cardinals have had at least 1 or 2 guys go down with injury off the edge. And like I said, Jonathan Gannon, go back to that Eagles defense that was in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. They got guys like Baron Browning off the edge involved consistently. Hassan Reddick played very, very well for Jonathan Gannon. Baron Browning has a chance to thrive in the second half of the season playing for that Arizona team, which has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and obviously for Denver making the first move of the NFL trade deadline this week, there's more moves that could be made. But we asked the question: Will this be the only move that the Broncos make? And if not, what other players or names should Broncos Country keep their eye on? Maybe going elsewhere. We'll break it down and much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Hillsdale College, and time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Finding a way to revamp your education or your knowledge of things that have gone on, things that you've learned in school or didn't learn in school, is important, whether that's history, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. If you study these things in school, you might have lost track of what you learned over the course of time. I certainly have, and it's great to be able to brush up on that from time to time, and Hillsdale College gives you the way to do that, because our sponsor, Hillsdale College, they are offering more than 40 free. That's right, Free. That spells free online courses that include the Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and so many more classes that you can take for free. And all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever. You can tune in wherever you're at. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or you can just enjoy the lecture. So check it out today. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There is no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and I want to take a moment to say thank you to all the listeners of Locked On Broncos for everything that they do for Sayre Bedinger and myself. Certainly, your viewership or listenership has changed our lives, so we want to thank you. This month is all about gratitude, and along with everyone in Broncos Country that we just thanked, there's also another person we don't get to thank enough, and that is ourselves. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we're trying our best to make sense of everything that's going on, even in this crazy world. It's not easy, and life doesn't come with a playbook or a manual that tells you how to overcome certain challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. Here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourself. Therapy has been very beneficial to me in the past. Whenever I've used it, I used BetterHelp Therapy. I was able to sign up, get matched with a licensed therapist, and I enjoyed the time that I had, and I learned a lot. Still, I apply the things that my therapist went over with me to this day. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and best of all, suited to your schedule to meet you wherever you're at. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Could there be some more wheeling and dealing for the Denver Broncos after they traded Baron Browning to the Arizona Cardinals for a 6th-round pick? Cody and I are going to talk about who could be on the block next for the Denver Broncos as we approach the 2024 NFL trade deadline. Thanks so much, Broncos Country, for tuning into today's bonus episode of Locked On Broncos, where and this is evidence right here that your boys, Cody and Sayre, we got you every single day, no matter what happens for the Denver Broncos. And you know what? I'm sure after we're done recording this, something else will happen. So we'll have you again for that episode. But Cody, let's talk about this because the jokes aside about the Broncos making moves right after you and I record an episode of the show, I think that obviously we can expect potentially more moves to come. The Broncos trading Baron Browning for a 6th-round pick to the Arizona Cardinals. It's been rumored that Greg Dulcich is potentially on the block as well. And you and I kind of talked off camera about another name earlier on today. Some interesting potential moves yet to be made here by the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, and look, it's the question. It's like, all right, you're in a position right now. And I think certainly we look at the Baron Browning trade right here. One thing it does immediately for Denver, look, they acquire more draft capital, which is something that Sean Payton wants, but it also frees up a spot on the 53-man roster as it currently stands. So I imagine that right there, Sayre, is probably going to be used to elevate Quan Alexander to promote him officially to the 53-man roster. But there's still some other guys returning from injuries in the next couple of weeks. Josh Reynolds eligible to come off of IR following this week's upcoming game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And you obviously have some other guys returning, like Luke Wattenberg could be in the mix to return. How does Denver maneuver their 53-man roster at this point? Well, certainly this move gives them some flexibility, but you look at some other players here that maybe could be on the way out here. You mentioned Greg Dulcich, obviously a player who started the season, struggled in the blocking department, has not formulated it to be the guy that the Broncos have envisioned for that potential joker role here. He could be on his way out. But then there's also maybe another question we look at right now, because in the episode we recorded for tomorrow's that's going to premiere, we hear from Broncos head coach Sean Payton on the idea and the notion that Audric Estime will get more touches. That brought you and I to prompt up bringing up Javonte Williams. Could Javonte be a potential name that's on his way out the door if a team calls and inquires? Certainly a possibility, but at this point, Sayre, I'm looking what teams right now are in need of a running back that are willing to depart with capital. I don't think it'll happen, but Javonte's a name to watch as well as a potential corner here on the Broncos defense.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because there are always, it only takes one team, right? And that's the thing. And I think you and I had talked about maybe the Cowboys earlier this year. It seems like that train is kind of going off the rails a little bit right now. So I don't know that the Cowboys are going to be trading for really anybody at this year's deadline, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see as, we've seen like, okay, if this guy's ready to go, if he's ready for more snaps, if he's ready for action, like the Broncos are willing to get him out of there. Like they felt like Devon Vele was ready for, what did he have in week 1? 8 targets. So they're like, hey, Devon Vele's ready. Tim Patrick out of here. I mean, Jonah Ellis, he's ready. Baron Browning out of here. So I think when they're ready for these guys to play, they've been showing and proving like they're willing to say, all right. I mean, even if it's a 3rd-round pick from, remember, George Payton's very first draft class. And by the way, for anybody that's wondering, as news is kind of just trickling in, looks like a $60 million deal for Jonathon Cooper over 4 years with $33 million guaranteed. So big congrats to Jonathon Cooper for that. Just an outstanding. Remember, he came into the NFL with heart issues and all these sorts of things. So to see him get that kind of a deal, I mean, hats off to him. What a performance and just a grind for him. So, but as far as other guys getting traded, Cody, I really do think that, I mean, we mentioned it in the show that's going to drop tomorrow, but players like Damari Mathis, who was inactive this past weekend after getting, reactivated immediately after coming off IR. Very, very interesting, and kind of like the plot sort of thickens now when you're looking at things. And speaking of Drew Sanders, I'm super scattered right now, Cody, because stuff is literally coming in as we're talking, as we're sitting here. Mike Kliss now tweeting what you kind of just said, reiterating about Drew Sanders. He says one reason for moving Baron Browning was outside linebacker Drew Sanders close to returning from PUP with Achilles injury. So, I mean, that's as clear of an indicator there. You heard it from Cody. Now you've heard it from Mike Kliss. The reports are confirmed that Drew Sanders could be on the way back.
Yeah, and look, I think that Denver's obviously thinking very forward thinking at this point, right? We said it as well in the episode that will drop tomorrow here that, as Sean Payton said himself, Superman's not walking through that door. Denver's not one player away. We talk about playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. Certainly, it'd be nice to get Bo Nix another guy. Not sure that's going to be in the trade deadline here for the Broncos, but very much Denver's going to have more financial freedom and the salary cap coming up in free agency. Yes, they're still paying, I think, 33 million of Russ's dead cap, but more capital, a little bit more financial freedom, some potential extensions here, create space that will allow the Broncos to go out there and continue to sharpen their tools a little bit to see what they have in terms of getting back to competing. And you have to have the assets, you have to have the capital. Very, very curious to see what's going to happen here the rest of the way. But Broncos country, that'll wrap up our breaking news bonus episode. Locked On Broncos here. Denver trading Baron Browning to the Arizona Cardinals in exchange for a 6th-round pick, extending Jonathon Cooper on a 4-year deal. Denver busy here on this Monday. Make sure you check out tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos, as Sayre and I recap what we learned from Sean Payton's presser. A little bit of an emphasis on Audric Estime getting more touches here for the Broncos going forward. Sean Payton says that is something that he believes is going to happen. We'll break that down and much more on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos. And watch there be another trade after this all happens here. Just
100%.
our luck.